Now, to yet another case of a Christian being vilified by the media, charged, dragged through the courts, and only when the damage is done, declared innocent. Declared innocent today. This time it's Brian Houston, founder of Hillsong Church in Sydney. I'll talk to him in a second, but some background first. You can tell why Brian Houston became a hate figure for a media that seems so anti-Christian. He started this Pentecostal church in 1983 and turned it into almost a brand. In fact, Australia's biggest single church. To judge by the worshippers each week, people are attracted by its relaxed style, its music, and of course, Houston's preaching.
But I believe tonight that there will be the scent of forgiveness.
Now, his church was so successful that Prime Minister Scott Morrison, self-Pentecostal, went to it to be interviewed by Houston. And the church expanded globally to the United States and nearly 30 other countries, but it all went bad for Houston. 24 years ago, his father, Frank, now dead, told his son had sexually abused a boy, 7 years old at the time, in 1970. Now, Houston did not go to the police. He said the victim, by then in his late 30s, had told him he did not want police told. Had not told police himself, and he was an adult. But that victim now says, well, I didn't say that, and police charged Houston with concealing the crime to protect his church. And today, the magistrate, though, hearing the case, said, no, Houston did have a reasonable excuse under the law not to tell authorities. He knew or believed on reasonable grounds that the victim did not want this matter reported to police. Brian Houston joined me a short while ago. Brian Houston, thank you so much for your time. How did it get to this, you being charged when the magistrate says you were just doing what the victim wanted?
Well, I think that's a big question, and unfortunately it's been taking 25 years for that to finally today be answered.
25 years. You said outside the court today you were the victim of a targeted attack. What do you mean by that?
Well, I genuinely believe that if I wasn't Brian Houston from Hillsong Church, this charge would never have happened. There were many people who were aware of the accusations about my father before I was, and none of them did anything, in fact, about it. I was the one who confronted my father, and I end up being the one many years later getting charged.
Is it the anti-Christian element that you're referring to here?
Anti-church, anti-Christian. I think that there is a hostility that comes towards especially prominent pastors, people who are doing something a little different than the norm. And it's a tragic blight, I think, on sections of the Australian media and on sections of the Australian population.
Yes, there were lots of spooky stories about your evil church and the secrets of the church, documentaries like that. It was quite extraordinary.
Yes.
But, you know, a lot of people will want to know, what did you do about your father when he admitted to you in 1999 that he had abused that boy? Was it like, you know, the accusation was from the prosecutors, you're trying to all keep it quiet? Is that what you actually did?
No, in fact, the exact opposite. And one of the things that came out today in the judgment was that the judge believed, the magistrate believed, that I, in fact, opposite, in a way, exactly the opposite to a cover-up, which is what I've always believed, because that's exactly what happened. I began to tell people immediately.
You told the church you got your father out of the church, is that correct?
I suspended his credential after I confronted him, and then I went to the board members of both the church he pastored, Sydney Christian Life Centre, and the church that I pastored, which then was Hills Christian Life Centre, it became Hillsong Church, and systematically from there spoke to leaders, spoke to various groups in the church. As I think I said, I spoke to the National Executive of the Assemblies of God, who were the governing body. It's a movement of around 1,100 churches. And so I always felt like I got on the front foot and addressed the situation, and was, to be honest, a little bit shocked that this even ended up in a Royal Commission in 2014, which now is 9 years ago. So 25 years since this happened, over 50 years since his abuses, 9 years since the Royal Commission, and 2 years since I got charged, and then finally today in 2023, we got to this point.
It's it's an incredible saga. Now, your argument was the victim tells you, I don't want you to go to the police. By the time you know it, he's in his late 30s. He could himself go to the police and apparently hadn't done so and hadn't turned his mind to doing that. Do you think you were justified in not going to the police yourself?
Well, his exact words to me were, I don't want you to tell the police. He said, if anyone is going to go to the police, it will be me. But that was also substantiated by his mother, who had told me he didn't want to go to the police, and other people who were privy to the information of this, that my dad had allegedly abused Brett Sengstock. And so there was a clear narrative. He didn't want the police involved, and he was 37 when I first found out. Again, sections of the media love to have made it look like this, I found this out when it was a 7-year-old boy. And if that was the instance, obviously we would have gone to the police. But no, it was a 37-year-old man. And all the way up till when my father died, 5 years later, still, the victim, who I do feel very sad for, but he hadn't still gone to the police at that point, and nor had anyone else.
So how did you end up getting charged? It's just an absolute mystery to me, given these fairly, uncontroversial facts.
Well, yes, I think, again, sections of the media, are complicit because they built a narrative on a premise that was completely false. And off that narrative, by omission, I think omission is one of the biggest tools of pictures that are painted. Not mentioning that this wasn't a boy that I found out was being abused. It was a 37-year-old man who had been abused in the 1970s when I was a teenager, by the way, and obviously I was unaware of it. And so I think the fact that this even came to the point where the DPP charged me was pressure from the media.
Do you draw any parallels with the George Pell case?
I always felt very sad for George Pell because of my own experiences. And I was very relieved, to be honest, when the High Court, Supreme Court, finally unanimously found him innocent. It's just a pity it took that long. And other church figures as well. And especially, as I said, if there's a level of prominence to those church figures, even the attention at the Royal Commission that, say, Cardinal Pell got, and then I got, and maybe one or two others who were other situations that may even have been worse, but they didn't get any media attention at all.
Now, Brian Hewson, I don't know whether there's a connection here or it's just happened, happenstance, something else. But from the outside, it seems that your life went a bit haywire after you were charged, or about the time you were charged. You must have known it was coming. You were charged with drunk driving in the US 2 years ago. You were investigated by your church for allegedly being inappropriate with 2 female staffers around the same time. You resigned as the church's pastor. You went to the US. What on earth happened there? What is this connected? Are they just different sort of unfortunate events? What happened?
Those are big questions. I do think from the time in 1999 when I found out about my father, that basically framed so much of my life from that point till now. Completely changed the day-to-day things I was addressing in life. And yes, sadly, over those years, and particularly in more recent years, I didn't handle all those things well. I know a lot of the narratives out there, false, not right. I never had a sexual issue, I had a substance issue. And one of those was sleeping tablets, which I overcame in 2012. I've never taken a single sleeping tablet since 2012. And then the sad day at a Hillsong conference, which is just a night of shame I'm very embarrassed about. But again, it's not what people think it is. I'll leave that for another time to talk about. But, and then the DUI.
Is this where you were found in another woman's, in a woman's room? Is that the incident you mean?
Well, yes. And I knocked on the wrong door. In fact, I knocked on the door next to our door. And I thought that person was in our room in the state of confusion that I was in. But that's a story for another day.
Okay, well, where are you now in your life?
But now I'm strong. My wife and I are doing well. Today is a huge burden off our shoulders. And I'm only 69. I'm a young man, so I feel upbeat about the next decade. And I'm not exactly sure what that's going to look like yet, but I do know I'm too young to retire. And so I hope to make a solid contribution. I love the Lord Jesus Christ. I love serving him. I love people. I love the congregation at Hillsong. We still miss them desperately. And so I'm full of expectation that we'll forge out something for the future.
Where are you making your home now then? You feel happy enough to be back in Australia?
You know what? I love Australia. Bobby and I, we both love Australia, but Australia in many ways hasn't loved us. And that makes me very sad, but it's a truth. And so we're in a state of flux. I think we will be spending more time overseas where potentially there's a lot more opportunity for us. But this is our place. I wasn't born in Australia, but I've been a citizen for over 40 years, and so it's in our blood. We were going for the Matildas last night. So, yes.
You didn't want to talk about the two cases where the church investigated harassment alleged of two women, one of whom quit the church. But I played earlier a clip, that clip of you preaching that you felt the Lord's forgiveness in the room. Do you forgive it? Do you feel it now?
Look, I've always known that God's a God of grace, and I took these things to God. And at the time, I mean, with the one issue was in 2012, I sent a single text. It was reported as some text, but it was a single text, and it said simply, under the influence of sleeping tablets, it said simply, if I'd have seen you, I may have wanted to hug and kiss you. It was a stupid text. I was not conscious. I was, in a state of subconsciousness, and when I woke up in the morning and realised what I'd done, it wasn't something that was done premeditated or anything like that, and I apologised immediately. So that happened. And then in 2019 is the situation where, again, I took a double dose of anti-anxiety tablets. It only ever happened once. I never had a problem with those tablets. It happened once, but mixed with alcohol, again, I was in a state of confusion and ended up knocking on the door next to our room rather than our door.